world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Friday, November 7th, as you are listening to this. And of course, we got a lot going on. Now, we are in the 38th day of this government shutdown, and there does not appear to be still any end in sight. Now, there was some movement apparently in the last couple of days. Apparently, there has been a bipartisan group of negotiators getting together, and they may have the framework of a plan. Here's the problem. I don't know if the Democrats are actually going to accept this bipartisan deal as it sits. Because from what I am hearing, it sounds like it would be they reopen the government. They pay for major swaths of the government in 3 separate bills called a minibus, which is the opposite of the omnibus. You may have heard that term. That is usually the phrase for the big bulk spending package that funds everything for the course of a year, which is separate from a budget. Because usually like an omnibus is just outlining where they keep most of the spending the same. It's just, okay, we agree to authorize at previous levels or with a standard increase. They don't actually go through and do a full budget. We have not passed a full budget since 1997, I believe. And at that point, that is when former President Bill Clinton passed a budget and left us with a surplus, and we were actually working on paying down the deficit and the national debt. But that was a long time ago. For anybody who was old enough to remember 1997 like me, you probably feel it every day. Now, with this, the problem with this minibus proposal is that from what I am reading, and this is the preliminary stuff that has been released to the public, is that it would fund major parts of the government for a full year, or at least until next September. So we wouldn't have to deal with potentially another government shutdown until right before the midterm elections. But what do Democrats get out of it with their demands and what they are asking? It sounds like all they would get out of it is a promise to take a vote on extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies at a later date, which how much later is left when we are talking about subsidies that expire at the end of the calendar year. And here we are basically 54 days to the end of the year. How much later is left? Are Democrats going to be able to trust Republicans to actually hold that vote? Or are they going to say, well, we'll talk about it later and kick the can down the road to, say, March or June or the next government shutdown next year? Don't know. Beyond that, you have Speaker of the House Mike Johnson saying, well, if they do agree to something in the Senate, there's no guarantee we will take it up. They're not wanting to deal with any of that and agree to any of those votes. So now we've got a problem. Do Democrats cave? And it sounds like there was nothing in this bipartisan agreement that at least a few Democrats are working on that would address the Medicaid cuts. And I think if Democrats cave at this point and agree to this kind of a deal on nothing more than a promise, then they've lost the momentum they had just gained from how bad they won in the off-year elections that we just had. Now, Democrats need to do a better job of making sure that they don't cave here. And the fact that it's even being discussed about caving, I think Chuck Schumer needs to talk to some of his Senate Republicans and saying, okay, or Senate Democrats, and say, okay, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to put the votes out there to pass that, knock it off. negotiate, get us our demands, or else. Now, they're not going to be completely unreasonable, I don't think, if they come back with a guarantee in this package of 2 or 3 years of Affordable Care Act subsidies and a significant decrease in the cuts to Medicaid, or an extension for when the Medicaid cuts would go into effect. That would give them a time frame to be able to negotiate something. Say they wait to kick them into effect till 29 or something like that. Democrats would probably feel that they have an advantage, that they're going to have some momentum going into the midterms, and that they would be able to deal with it then. I could see that happening. But right now, we are hearing that they are working on this minibus, and it sounds like it may only have, you know, a promise to get the Affordable Care Act subsidies going, and that's just not enough, if you ask me. Democrats should not accept just an I promise, because Republicans have notoriously gone back on their word. As I've talked about in numerous podcasts since we have been dealing with this government shutdown. Back in March, the Democrats had agreed to fund the government till the end of September, with a promise then of discussing the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Well, later's here. There were no discussions. They haven't done anything about them. They weren't included in this funding package. And now all we get out of Republicans is, well, pass what we want. We'll talk about it later. That's not how negotiations work. Now you will have Republicans and MAGAs coming to you and saying, well, it is a Democratic shutdown. They just need to pass a clean CR. Republicans do it all the time when a Democrat's in office. But there's a difference. Under Joe Biden, when they passed a clean CR, they were funding it at previously established and negotiated levels. That never changed. Except when Donald Trump this time, Republicans passed a clean CR in March, funding things at the Joe Biden level. Then in July, they passed that one big beautiful bill, which had a bunch of cuts to government programs in it, which automatically changed what the CR is. Now, this new CR would be at the new levels under the one big beautiful bill. That is not a clean CR. That is not the same thing as what the Republicans funded last year under Joe Biden. But see, that's the problem with Republicans. They don't look at things. They don't see the difference. They try to find equivalency in something that looks close enough and say, oh yeah, they're the same thing, when they're not. Now, as we're hearing about them talking about doing all of this, one of the things we are dealing with is the SNAP benefits not being paid out as of yet. Now, I thought they had already been told they were going to be paid. Donald Trump has come out, though, and he has publicly said they're not paying anything until after the Democrats agree to open the government. And he doesn't want any sort of negotiations. He wants what he wants. And he wants to be the tough guy, and he wants Democrats to cave to him. He thinks that he would look weak for accepting any of the Democratic demands, not realizing that he would actually look like a master strategist, and he would actually look like somebody who deserves the master dealmaker title that he likes to give himself. But that's where he sits on it, and he just wants what he wants. So with these SNAP benefits, there was already a judge that said you must make payment by, I think it was Wednesday. Well, here we are to Friday. And Donald Trump had said they weren't going to do it. It sounded like they were making public statements saying, well, how are we supposed to do what we're supposed to? It's going to take a long time because we got to switch to this backup program, and this isn't how it goes. And it was just excuse after excuse. Well, a federal judge in Rhode Island has said that the government has until tomorrow, or well, today sometime as you're listening to this, to fund the November SNAP payment fully. And they have to figure out how they're going to make it happen. Now, that's a problem for Donald Trump. And now we are hearing that he is going to be appealing this decision. But that goes against what Mike Johnson is trying to spin for a narrative. That goes against what some Republicans are trying to spin as a narrative. They want you to believe that it is Democrats who have shut the government down and who are denying SNAP benefits. Well, Democrats have brought in the Senate a bill, and they asked for unanimous consent to pay SNAP benefits for the month of November and possibly December if the government shutdown goes that long. What happened? Republicans shot it down. Didn't happen. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said, well, even if it passed, there's no need for us to come back and bring the House back into session and actually vote on that. And now you hear Donald Trump is going to be appealing potentially this ruling, saying that they had to fully fund November SNAP benefits and they had to figure it out. Now, why would he appeal? Well, one of the things, and I know it's going to sound like a conspiracy theory, that's actually gaining some traction is this thought that the money's not there. Could the money be gone? And with Donald Trump, that's a very real possibility. There has been a lot of movement and a lot of things going on when it comes to how they are funding varying things. Now, we had heard that they were going to be out of money for ICE and they were going to be out of money for the Department of Homeland Security, and some of these other departments had been way overspending. And then we didn't hear anymore. Somehow they came up with the money for it. Well, did they take the money out of the emergency fund for SNAP benefits? Now, this emergency fund is supposed to be used for just that, emergencies. But Donald Trump doesn't want to tap into it. I'd say people not having food going into November would count as an emergency. You have a government shutdown. You have the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. As you are listening to this is the 7th. This would be the 38th day the government has been shut down. The longest record was 35 days under Donald Trump during his first administration. And it took swearing in an entirely new Congress to get it passed, including having a Democratic controlled House of Representatives and a Democratic Speaker of the House. Now, this whole situation is bizarre because they're not negotiating. In previous years, how this would happen is Democrats have laid out their demands. Republicans would say, well, we can't do forever subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. Best we can do is 2 years or 3. Democrats would come back with like 25 or 30. And then Republicans would say 3 or 4. And they'd go back and forth, meet in the middle, somewhere around 5 to 10 probably. And they would move on to the Medicaid cuts. And they would say, okay, well, we want to return the entire $1 trillion that was cut. Republicans would say, can't do that. And they would meet in the middle, maybe somewhere in the realm of $300 billion returned and delaying the cuts for 2 years or something like that. They would negotiate, but that's not what's going on here. There's no negotiations going on, and the House of Representatives isn't even in town. Mike Johnson keeps canceling votes. Now, I haven't heard if he is going to cancel votes next week, but they're running out of weeks in the month. I think they have next week and the week after. If they don't come up with some kind of a resolution, that's getting into Thanksgiving, and they take like a week or 2 off for Thanksgiving. Then they're only back for a couple of weeks, and then they take 2 or 3 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. So they have like 2 to 4 weeks, I think, the rest of the year, not counting this upcoming week, where they would normally be in session. And if they don't come up with some kind of an agreement to fund the government between now and then, the government may not get opened until next year. Now, when they do bring the House back into session, Mike Johnson's got multiple problems. First of all, he has to swear in Representative Grijalva. She won her special election to fill the seat vacated by her father when he passed away earlier this year. All the way back at the end of September, she is the record holder for the longest time a person has gone without being sworn in. Mike Johnson has all kinds of excuses telling her to get to work for her constituents, which she can't do because until she is sworn in, she doesn't have access to her budget, can't get access to the internet, can't get access to laptops, can't even have a phone line, all of those things that are tied to the fact that until she gets sworn in, she is only representative-elect. And Mike Johnson keeps trying to avoid swearing her in. Why? Well, because of the Epstein files. There is a discharge petition on the floor of the House of Representatives. This discharge petition requires 218 votes to pass. and or signatures to bring it up for a vote anyway. Now, why 218? Well, that is because the House of Representatives has 435 members. Half of 435 is 217 and a half, and you have to have a majority. So since you can't have half of a person, you have to have a whole person. That makes 218. Now, if you were watching the Rational Boomers podcast or his live from last night, there was somebody in there talking about how there is a special election in Tennessee for a representative on December 2nd. And this person was saying that when that person wins, it's probably going to be a Republican, and that changes the number for the discharge petition. They were incorrect. And I'm not calling them out, and I'm not going to call them out by name. They were just incorrect. The reason you need 218 is because it takes a majority in the House of Representatives to force it. That is 218 currently. If they change the number of representatives in the House, that number would change. But for right now, a majority is 218. That is where we are at. Now, there may come a point where another Republican decides to sign off on this discharge petition. And the minute they do, that takes away his reason, Mike Johnson's reason for not swearing in Representative Grijalva. But what other issues is he going to have? Well, when she signs the discharge petition, it's going to force a vote on the Epstein files. And that's bad for Mike Johnson because Donald Trump does not want there to be a vote on the Epstein files at all. Does not. He has said if anybody votes in favor of it, they are hostile to this administration and to Donald Trump himself. That does not sound like the type of person who is not in the Epstein files. But he also knows if they have to answer to their voters that the voters want the Epstein files released because they have been told for years that it is nothing but Democrats in the Epstein files. So they want to see the files. They want their proof that Democrats are and left-leaning people are these horrible people. So they can't win with this. So when it comes up for a vote, he's gonna have to deal with it. And Donald Trump may get pissed off and call up one of his MAGA buddies in Congress and say, Mike Johnson was supposed to bury that discharge petition. It passed. I'm not happy about it. Get rid of him. Vote him out as speaker. Now, it wouldn't take very many Republicans and all Democrats to vote out Mike Johnson, and he'd be gone. Well, we also have the government shutdown, and I've talked about it before. With the government being shut down, if they cave and give in to Democrats, and Donald Trump thinks it looks weak, he may call again a buddy in Congress and say, hey, Mike Johnson defied me. I want him gone as speaker. Vote in somebody else. And depending on how it goes, Democrats may save Mike Johnson in that case, if it means they get their way and they actually pass a funding bill that actually restores Affordable Care Act credits or extends them and restores some money to Medicaid. They may say, hey, Mike Johnson, we want X, Y, and Z in that bill. You put it in the bill, we vote to save you. Could happen. But see, but those are two possible ways he is facing a motion to vacate and lose his speakership. But there's also a very real way that he may lose his speakership, and that is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, she brought forward a motion a while back to vacate Mike Johnson. And apparently it is still on the books because they never voted on it. And apparently now she has a co-sponsor or co-sponsors in the Republican Party. And it sounds like, because she is getting sick of the House being out, them not doing anything on fixing healthcare, she's calling them out saying, hey, we keep saying we want to replace Obamacare. We're not doing anything. What are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Let's do something and bring us back into session so we can get to work. It sounds like she is going to bring up her motion to vacate and try to remove Mike Johnson anyway. So once again, Democrats are going to be faced with the decision. Do they save Mike Johnson? And the question to that is going to be, does it get them anything in this government shutdown fight? Or do they let Republicans twist in the wind and have to come up with a new speaker? Problem is, it could take weeks to find a new speaker. When they voted out Kevin McCarthy 2 years ago, it took them 3 weeks to come up with Mike Johnson, and without a speaker, absolutely nothing gets done in the House of Representatives. Now, several Republicans could side with all Democrats and vote in something like Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. I've talked about it before. Now, that would not change committee assignments. That would not change the fact that Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives. None of that would change. All that would change is the fact that Mike Johnson would not be Speaker. Hakeem Jeffries would be Speaker of the House, and he could control what gets brought to the floor, etc. Now, there may be some considerations where, some backdoor dealing going on that Hakeem Jeffries may have to agree to let certain things come up for a vote or something like that in exchange for it. But having Hakeem Jeffries run the House of Representatives would be a step in the right direction because Republicans can't lead. We've seen that with Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House. Now, Donald Trump got caught in a lie. He has been saying for weeks, for months, that the economy is doing great, prices are coming down. And he apparently has said he wants to start talking about affordability next year and doing something about making sure people can afford to live. Here's the problem. He just wants to start doing something. I thought everything he was doing so far was supposed to be fixing that. I thought his tariffs were supposed to fix affordability and make it so people can afford to live. I thought his trade deals were supposed to make it so it was better for Americans. That's what he campaigned on. That's what he's been telling us all along. Not to mention the fact that he campaigned on lowering prices day one. Here we are, 11 months into his term, and nothing's changed. In fact, it's gotten worse because of his tariffs. So he wants to start looking at affordability. Okay, fine, whatever. I don't think he's going to actually do anything. This is just a talking point to get his base saying positive things about him and trying to fix his flailing poll numbers. Well, where did he get caught in the lie? He was talking about how a Thanksgiving dinner from Walmart is going to cost less than it did last year under Joe Biden. Now, from what I have seen on this Thanksgiving dinner that they are supposedly comparing, they're not comparing apples to apples because the dinner they were comparing from last year to this year, last year's dinner had 44 items, this year's has 15, and last year's it was using name brand items, this year it's using store brand. You didn't compare the exact same grocery list. So how can you say it's cheaper? That'd be like me saying, well, I'm going to go buy pop and I'm going to I'm saving $3 a 12 pack because I bought it at Walmart, but I got Sam's Club or Sam's Choice or whatever it's called, their store brand. And the other person got, Pepsi. You're not comparing the same thing. Just because it's similar does not make it the same. And when you're talking about price, you should be comparing apples to apples. So, of course, Donald Trump gets caught in it. And then, of course, when he gets called out to his face, he doesn't say anything about it. He just says, yeah, prices are coming down. We're doing great. Walmart tells us it's going down. Like he just thinks if he says it louder, more often that people will believe it. And a certain section of this population will, which is a bad thing, which is a scary thing, really, when you think about it. Now, he was holding a press event in the Oval Office today. And this press event was about prescription drugs and how he's come up with a couple of deals for a couple of weight loss drugs, and that once his Trump RX site goes live, which he says can't fail because it has his name attached to it, he doesn't want to be a failure. Well, here's the thing. There have been numerous things that have had his name attached to it that have failed. Trump Steaks, Trump Water, Trump University, Trump Casinos. And that's just a few of the things that have gone by the wayside that were attached to Donald Trump. But he says this Trump RX is going to be this great thing. And they're going to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Well, now what he was saying in this meeting about these prescription drug prices is that he was talking about pricing, and that he was going to lower these weight loss drugs, most of which are about $1,000 a month right now without insurance, down to about $150 a month without insurance. But he was also going to allow Medicaid to cover them. Now, that's interesting. I don't know if they can make those decisions and those determinations, or if they need to actually pass something through Congress to change whether or not they can be covered by Medicaid. I will admit I'm not 100% sure there. But when he is saying that he's going to lower them down from 1,000 to 150 bucks, that's great. That's like an 85% reduction. Cool. Here's the problem. He has put a bunch of tariffs on pharmaceuticals, including some of these weight loss drugs, basically saying you need to develop them here. Now, I don't know if these are ones that were developed here or if they are imported, so if the tariffs would apply. But typically, when he talks about lowering the cost of pharmaceuticals, he has said he would say, well, I'm going to lower them 100, 200, 300, 500, 600, 1,500%, I think was the highest number he threw out there. Well, if he was really going to do that on this Trump RX website, and it was going to be 1,500% cheaper for these pills that run $1,000 a month currently, that means if I took them every month, they would be paying me $14,000 to $15,000 instead of me paying them $1,000. He just maybe doesn't understand how prices work. Maybe he doesn't understand percentages. That might explain why so many things with his name attached to it, like I listed off, Trump Water, Trump Steaks, Trump Casinos, all of those things. Maybe that's why they failed, because he doesn't understand percentages. Now, as he was doing this event, there was a medical issue in the Oval Office. One of the people attending this event collapsed. Now, Dr. Oz ran over. A bunch of people did jump in and help. And did Donald Trump help? No. Do I expect him to jump in and help? No. Now, he stood there, and I've seen a couple different images now. Now, he appears to turn, and maybe he leans over to see what's going on. Once he realizes they're dealing with him, he kind of turns. He kind of just stares straight ahead. And he's got this kind of bewildered look on his face, or maybe irritated look on his face. It's hard to tell with him. But he seemed like he was not happy that this was going on, didn't seem overly concerned that the gentleman was on the floor and had just collapsed. And I never really saw any comments from him about how the gentleman was doing after the fact. Now, that just shows you Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about the people around him. He will sacrifice any of them if he thinks it makes him look good. Donald Trump is a raging narcissist, and because he wasn't the center of attention while this was all going on, I guarantee you he wasn't happy. Now, did I expect him to get down on the floor and actually help the guy? No. Multiple reasons. One, his health isn't in the best shape. Donald Trump, if he would have gotten down on the floor to try to help this guy, he probably couldn't have gotten up. He would have embarrassed himself, and maybe that's what would have finally done it, and he would have been, down for the count himself. But he didn't seem to show that much concern for what was going on, and that's the issue I seem to have here. Now, he was having a meeting tonight, or last night, with some representatives from Asia. This is a follow-up to his big Asia trip. And he appeared multiple times to doze off. His face started to droop, according to some of the images I'm seeing there. And numerous times he would pass questions off to other people. He's been doing that a lot lately. When he doesn't seem to not have an answer, well, he'll say, well, so-and-so should talk about it. You should deal with it. Why don't you tell him what we're doing with that, etc. Which seems weird for somebody who likes to be the center of attention. Now, maybe he realizes that he is not as sharp as he once was. That could entirely be. Well, J.D. Vance was asked at this event about this judge's ruling uh, ordering the administration to pay out SNAP benefits. Now, Donald Trump had said we need to keep our funds liquid. Which, what does that even mean? Why does the government need to be liquid? We're not liquid. We're upside down. We pay out as fast as it comes in. We are paying out interest on things. We are fighting deficit spending because we don't have enough money coming into the coffers. And it's even worse because of his tax cuts. The last two rounds of tax cuts has cut the top 1%, income tax way down. At one time, the top 1% in this country paid 91% of their income as taxes. But the reason it worked was because you gave them all sorts of tax breaks and incentives in which they would turn around and invest in the lower and middle classes, in paying better wages, in building a new plant and hiring people, and all of those things that generate income. But they also spur the economy. They weren't incentivized just to keep it sitting in a bank. Well, J.D. Vance said the ruling coming from this judge was just absurd, that it was an activist judge, it was judicial overreach, trying to, take power that it didn't really have. Here's the problem. They do sort of have the authority for what they were doing. The law says that the emergency fund is supposed to be used. This administration's not doing that, so they said use the emergency fund. Well, then they looked at the harm that was being done and past precedent set by, other shutdowns, etc., where this was going, where they would actually fund the full SNAP benefits, etc., and said, well, fund it in its entirety. And that's what J.D. Vance is now saying is absurd and judicial overreach. It's funny, though. They love judicial overreach when it is favoring them. They typically liked what the courts were doing when it came to telling Joe Biden no. But now that the courts are doing the same thing and telling Donald Trump no, they have all sorts of things to say. They want to, impeach some of the justices or impeach some of the judges because of how they've ruled on certain cases, etc. It is ridiculous. It's not absurd that you must pay food stamp benefits out to people. People need to eat. Now, I was actually hopeful that SNAP benefits would have already been paid, and I don't know if they will be paid out today. Some states do have the funds in their own state coffers, and we're able to fully fund at their own expense the SNAP program for the month. Now, whether they're going to be able to continue to do that month after month is another story. What they should do, what Congress should do, is pass something like what they were trying to do with that bill that was brought forward by a Democrat to just fund SNAP. Problem is, Republicans voted down. But they want you to believe that the Democrats are the ones that are preventing people from being able to eat. And that's not the case. It is fully Republicans. Now, with all of this going on, I know a lot of you are worried about what you can do to help. How can you help, etc. If you have food that you are not going to eat and you want to donate it to your local food bank, or if you know somebody who needs food, great. If you're just going to help out somebody you know, okay, and you go to the store following a few deals and spend $20 and get some stuff that will help them out, great. If you are just going to donate to a food pantry, I would advise, and you can do whatever you want, but I would advise that you give money to the food pantry and not food. If you are not, instead of going out and buying food specifically to donate. Why? Because they can go to their suppliers, like here in Iowa, all of the food pantries can go to the Iowa Food Bank and they can buy food for pennies on the dollar. It's something like 10 to 20 cents per pound for anything they choose to go get. Doesn't matter what it is, it's all by weight. And that they can do a lot with $20. and go get 20. Well, if it's 10 cents a pound, now you're talking $20 would get them. What would that be? 200 pounds of food. Now that's a lot more. You're not going to go get 200 pounds of food for $20 at your local grocery store. Just ain't going to happen. And not with the variety that they can go get. And they can get the things that are actually requested from their food pantry. But if you have stuff that, like I said, you're not going to eat, that is going to go bad, maybe you bought something, decided to try it, but because of a sale, you bought 3 or 4 and you're not going to use it. That's fine. That's a different story. But don't go out and specifically buy something to donate. They'd be better off if you gave them cash. That's just my take from how I understand it works. Again, you can do it how you can help however you can, any way you can. But that is just one of the things that will help people out. Okay, so JD Vance is saying funding food stamps or being told to fund the food stamps is absurd, which is not a good look for JD Vance. He is trying to rehabilitate his image because he knows he's probably going to have to be president at some point. Now, I keep talking about Donald Trump and his health issues. Well, just as recently as last night, there were some images that came out from this, you know, meeting with Asian dignitaries, etc., where he appeared to doze off. He was apparently too worn out. His face started to droop again, which can potentially be the signs and symptoms of a stroke or maybe post-stroke. He has all sorts of other issues. We see him dragging his foot. I've talked about it before. Normally, when you walk, you land heel first. But if something has affected your nervous system or you've had a stroke, you don't necessarily do that. Instead, maybe you can't lift your foot up anymore. Maybe you don't have the muscle control because of that stroke or other issue. And instead of hitting heel first, you're now stepping on the ball of your foot. It screws up your gait. It makes it look like you're dragging your foot. We see him appear to be lost several times in public, like he just doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know where he is. When he was in Japan and he was supposed to do this ceremony with the Japanese prime minister, they were supposed to walk up to the American and Japanese flags, turn and bow. Donald Trump kind of shuffles along. He's walking ahead of the Japanese prime minister, kind of gets up to the American flag, gives it a salute, and then just kind of keeps walking like he doesn't even know necessarily where he is. He was supposed to stop, turn, and bow. And I guarantee you somebody tried to explain it to him. And either he didn't listen and told them, I know what I'm doing, I'm the president of the United States, or he just forgot. We're hearing him talk about cognitive tests. I bring it up all the time because it's relevant. Now, the simple fact of the matter is if he's taking cognitive tests, that is a warning sign that there is something seriously wrong with Donald Trump. So JD Vance should be focusing on trying to rehabilitate his image. So if something does happen to Donald Trump and he doesn't make it to the end of this term, which is a very real scenario, with all of the health things we are seeing, he doesn't look good. He looks like there is something seriously wrong. There are people who are actively saying he may not make it to the end of this calendar year. Now, that is just people who are observing how he is acting. Obviously, they're not doctors. I've seen some that are health, professionals that are saying, well, without actually treating him and seeing him as scans and things like that, we can only go by what we see. But still, there are people looking at it going, wait a minute, is he going to make it to the end of the year? This looks a little sketchy. And that's a real concern. So JD Vance should be trying to polish his image ahead of needing to become president. Now, I've talked about it before. What could happen here? Well, if the Democrats actually do what they're supposed to do and they don't cave on this government shutdown, they could end up picking up seats in the midterms. If that happens, and something happens to Donald Trump, J.D. Vance could end up being president for 2 years or so without a favorable Congress. And that would actually be something Republicans would probably want because it could paint J.D. Vance in a favorable light. Because then they could say, well, he didn't have a Republican controlled Congress. He never got to enact any of his policies. Never mind the fact that he has agreed pretty much in lockstep with everything Donald Trump has done and brags about them being great policies, etc. But they could make him sympathetic enough to maybe try to get another term. I don't think it would work, but they could do that. Now, Donald Trump could, pass at any point. He may not be with us by the end of the year. He may not be with us by the end of his term. That's possible. But there could also come a point when Republicans have to turn on Donald Trump, and we're already seeing cracks forming. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene calling out Republicans. You have 4 Republicans voting on this motion or this discharge petition to bring up the Epstein files. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to bring out a motion to vacate Speaker Johnson. You have Senate Republicans saying, no, we're not getting rid of the filibuster. Now, Donald Trump is desperate to get rid of the filibuster. Why? Because he thinks that if they get rid of the filibuster, and he's right, they would be able to pass this continuing resolution and just fund the government and get everything going, which is true. They'd be able to do that. Here's the problem. Senate Republicans see the writing on the wall. They know what could happen going forward. They're worried about having to get, being in the minority again. So what they're staring at is going, well, what happens in 2028 if we get rid of the filibuster, Democrats take control in 2028, and there's a Democratic president? Well, then they can pass whatever they want, and we can't stop them. So Republicans are hesitant to get rid of the filibuster. Donald Trump wants it gone. If he still had the full control over the Republican Party like he used to, that would have been gone 3 weeks ago when he started calling for it. It's not happening. His hold over the Republican Party is starting to slip, in part because he's a lame duck. They also are starting to see how weak he is, and they are seeing the tide turn against Donald Trump. And I don't know how else you would talk about the elections that just happened on Tuesday without saying that it was, the tide turning against Donald Trump. The people have spoken. They're not happy with Republicans right now. I mean, that's how else do you explain losing 3 state house seats in Mississippi? They broke the supermajority in Mississippi. Republicans have had a supermajority for 13 years. It's suddenly gone. In Virginia, in the House of Delegates, they picked up like 10 to 13 seats. That's a significant increase when they had only held the House of Delegates by like 1 or 2. Again, just significant increases. So it's showing that the tide is turning against Republicans. Now, I want to talk about something that I've seen on social media, and apparently I did look into this a little bit, and apparently it is a thing. Apparently, in Kentucky, and this may also have been a thing in other red states that did not have elections, there were no elections for anything in Kentucky. But apparently, the Kentucky Secretary of State had to come out on election day and make a public statement because they were getting calls and questions, etc., about why there were no polling places open in Kentucky. And there were no polling places open in Kentucky because there were no elections in Kentucky. None. Now, I don't know if there were any, there might have been some like local elections, but basically almost everything in Kentucky was closed for polls. There were no statewide races, etc. But apparently people were wondering, why couldn't they vote for or against Mamdani? Or I can't think of the name now, the governor of Virginia, etc. And they had to be reminded that New York City is not in Kentucky. You can't vote for the mayor of New York City. You can't vote for the governor of Virginia from Kentucky unless you are a resident of Virginia and you have a mail-in ballot. And at first I thought this was just an absurd story. I thought there's no way it's legitimate, but apparently it's true. And the problem with this story is that it underscores one of the things we are fighting here when it comes to the Republican Party. We are fighting them, a group of people who show up to the polls every time they're open and they vote red. They vote Republican, no matter what. They didn't do any research as to, who these people are. They didn't realize that you couldn't vote for the governor of Virginia or the mayor of New York City from Kentucky because they're not in Kentucky. They just heard, oh, elections are going on. We got to go vote. We got to vote for the Republican. That's a sad state of affairs. And if you think I am blowing this story up, and making it up or whatever, I read that on Fox News. I mean, Fox News was making fun of Republican voters for wanting to go vote. And maybe making fun of is a little harsh there, but they did a story about the fact that Republican voters had to be reminded that they couldn't vote for the governor of Virginia or the mayor of New York City from Kentucky. So when it comes to voting, we need to make sure Democrats show up to vote next year in the midterms, specifically, as we have, a chance to potentially pick up the House, maybe the Senate. I keep talking about it because I think it's possible. I think we pick up the House by 40 to 50 seats. It's possible we pick up 4. 5 would be an amazing pickup, but it's possible we could pick up 4 seats in the Senate. If we pick up 4 and hold everything else that are up for grabs, Democrats have control of both chambers of Congress again, and they can check the power of the president. But it only works if Democrats show up to vote, because we need numbers to turn out against them, because Republicans will turn up to vote, and they don't critically think and look at the candidates. I know some of them do, but there is a number of Republican voters, and it is a significant number of Republican voters who will vote for the Republican no matter who, no matter what they're convicted of, no matter what they've done in their past. Doesn't matter, because they're a Republican. That's why you have them coming out saying things, in support of people who you wouldn't think they could defend, but they do, because they have the right letter beside their name. So we need to make sure when we go into the midterms that we keep the momentum up, we keep the pressure on, and that the Democrats turn up to vote. All right. So I just had to read the article to make sure I got some of the key points correct here. Nancy Pelosi has officially announced that she is retiring from Congress as of January of 2027. She will not seek re-election. Now, we thought this may happen. Nancy Pelosi is 85 years old. She was elected 39 years ago at the age of 47. She's done a great job as a leader in the Democratic Party, and this takes. I don't want to take anything away from the things she has done. She became the first female Speaker of the House. She's held that position twice. She's helped pass a bunch of legislation, and she held a tight grip over her party when she was Speaker by doing things like there was no motion to vacate when she was Speaker. She typically didn't have votes fail on the House floor. She wouldn't bring something up unless she knew she had the votes to pass it. She was an amazing Speaker of the House. And on some levels, because of her contributions, I can see where people would be sad to see her go. However, I am glad that she has decided to call it a career. Like I said, she is 85 years old. We wondered if she was going to retire. And now that she is not seeking reelection, I don't know if she was worried about a primary challenge. I had heard there was at least one person going to challenge her for the seat next year. Now that's not going to be a problem. And it's San Francisco is where she represents. So she is going to be succeeded by a Democrat. I don't think we have to worry about um, losing that seat to a Republican by any means. She is calling it a career at 85. I guess she would be probably 86, 87 by the time, depending on when her birthday is. I don't know it. Not off the top of my head, anyway. By the time that she turns around and finally retires. Now, thank you, Nancy Pelosi, for everything you have done. And I wish more members of the House of Representatives, more members of the Senate would follow her example. It is time that we get some of these people out of the levers of power, out of their positions. She has been in Congress for 39 years. I mean, she would have won her election in what? 80, would have been 86, I think. 86 would have been her first election, almost longer than I have been alive. I am not discounting anything she has done. She has a great legacy. And she did amazing things for the people of San Francisco and for this country. But it was definitely time that she retires. And there are other members of Congress that are in the same boat. We had a Republican member of the House of Representatives last year, and I can't think of her name right now. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. 6 months before she was up for re-election, just disappeared. They found her in a memory care unit. Just in a she had gotten checked in because she had memory problems. She was suffering from dementia. And they just kind of quietly let her just disappear because, in part, she was a deciding voice, even though she wasn't actually casting any ballots anymore. By her being there, she helped maintain that 4 or 5 seat majority in the House of Representatives that the Republicans had. You have Chuck Grassley over in the Senate. Dude is 92 years old. He will be 95 when he is up for re-election in 2028. And he wants to run again. There is no need for these people to continue to run year after year after year. They need to step aside. The world that they knew, the world they grew up in, is a different world than what it is now. They have far fewer years left than they have behind them, and they are still voting and passing legislation that is going to be affecting people in some cases for generations. When it's not, they're not going to be here when the effects of those things come to pass. Now, talking about Chuck Grassley here in Iowa, one of the reasons why Chuck Grassley keeps getting elected here in Iowa, in part, is name recognition. He has been in the Senate longer than I have been alive. There are several generations of people who have never known having a senator besides Chuck Grassley. Okay. Beyond that, you have the simple fact that he is the oldest serving member of the Senate on the Republican Party. And when the Republicans are in power, that does give him a bit of control and a bit of power. He is the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And he, people think he does a lot, and he extends that influence over the Senate to help the people of Iowa. And maybe he does. Simple fact of the matter is, though, he's been doing it for a long time. He is 92, going to be 95. He needs to go away. You had Dianne Feinstein. Last year, she passed away. She was a senator, a Democrat. And I'm bringing it up again because I want you to realize I am talking about this because it's a both sides problem. Both parties have issues when it comes to aging members. Dianne Feinstein passed away. She was either in her late 80s, early 90s as a senator. She was just trying to get to the end of her term because of some of the people that were going to run to replace her. They didn't want to have them give up their seats in Congress to run. They wanted to wait and then see what happened, and then campaign for a full seat and a full term, without having to do a special election. Well, she passed away, and we find out, I think it was before she even passed, but maybe it was after, I don't remember now, that at some point before she passed, her daughter had gone to court. And if the reporting I read was correct, her daughter had gone to court and had gotten power of attorney because they had determined that she was not competent enough to handle her own money. And they needed to go ahead and have somebody else manage her money. But yet she was in Congress voting and passing legislation, trying to figure out, and do things for the American people. We don't need to worry about whether or not some of these people are going to just pass from old age in Congress. We have enough problems worrying about whether or not the president is going to pass due to his health problems at any point. We've talked about that extensively. We don't need to worry about all of these members of Congress. So I am grateful for Nancy Pelosi for stepping aside. She has done a great job, and I'm not worried that she's not going to make it to the end of her term. I think that is going to be perfectly fine. I think she will make that, but she has decided to call it a career. That would be, I think, 41 years, I think, in politics when it's all said and done. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that number. Maybe it'll be 39 years when she gets to the end of this term. Could be. Either way, she has announced her retirement, and she'd already stepped out of Democratic leadership. She had passed the baton on to Hakeem Jeffries. Now, we will see if Hakeem Jeffries ends up becoming Speaker of the House when Democrats take back over, or if they decide to go another direction. Democrats could move towards somebody else. Whoever they pick, I don't expect them to hold 3 weeks of voting and multiple rounds of voting. I think they are going to have somebody in mind when they go in. And if they have control of the House, like I think they will after the midterms, I think that person is going to get voted in on one ballot, maybe two at the most. And they're going to get down to work and start holding Donald Trump accountable for some of the things he has done, starting to hold investigations, starting to look into all of this and to see where things go. All right. Well, that's it. That's all I have got for you today on the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk about news and politics. We've got a lot going on, going to have even more going on. We will see if Donald Trump complies with this court order to fund STAP fully today, like he was ordered to, and when those funds would actually be released to the states. I thought it was already going to be dealt with. It hasn't been. So hopefully tomorrow I will have a bigger update for you on that. But I want to thank you for joining me, and I will be back tomorrow because there's always stuff going on and always stuff to talk about.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.